Hello everybody, it's George from Ireland. Welcome back to my channel. This video is about the end of Latin as a subject in most state schools in England, and not many state schools in Northern Ireland. Wales and Scotland offer it. In the Republic of Ireland, we don't have many publicly funded schools offering it either. But to think that for 3 millennia, that was the mainstay of Western civilization, and all right, Greek was a written European language prior to that. Very first writing comes from Mesopotamia, which is now Iraq, over 5,000 years ago. The so-called English alphabet is actually the Latin alphabet. And it's an awful pity that Latin is no longer going to be taught in state schools. The funding will be removed, even now the preserved of independent schooling. So as part of the war in the West, which is waged by the left, maybe not all leftists are quite so foolish that Occidental heritage is something inherently evil. And Latin, you may say, what's the point? I'm not going to ancient Rome. Why would I bother learning a language that's spoken by absolutely nobody? And actually, some people have brought Latin back as a conversational language. Only a handful of Latin enthusiasts do that, and even the Vatican doesn't use it very much. I know that priest who was in Rome in one of the Venerabile universities in the 1960s in the English college, and the lectures were actually in Latin, but then they had to switch it into English for the Americans in particular. But Latin is a skeleton key for other languages, and they say you get six for the price of one. It's not quite true, but if you learn Latin, it'll make it easier to master French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, and so forth. And something like 25% of English words come from Latin, ultimately, often via French or other languages. And some of the case structure of Latin will help you a bit with German or Russian or various Slavonic languages too. There's not the same cases, not the same numbers, them, and they're not quite parallel, but still. And now I was rubbish at Latin. I scraped through it as a GCSE, but I don't really appreciate learning it. But I think it's there for an option. For the brainiest ones, you can simply keep adding languages. You know, go to prep school, learn French, and if you're good at that, Latin. If you're good at that, Spanish, if you're good at that, ancient Greek, if you're good at that, another modern language like Chinese these days, and so on. So it's a pity this will be denied to them. And at the highest level, obviously, people doing classics at university, they can be reading philosophy because well into the Middle Ages written in Latin. To read it in the original language, things lose something in translation. There's no such thing as a perfect translation. So it's an awful shame that a lot of this heritage is being lost. And yes, things can be translated, but it is better if they're not translated. And now only people go to independent school will have a chance to do that. We see how Philistine this is. Bridget Phillipson, shame on you. Remember Charles Clark? 20 years ago, a Labour so-called education secretary was really a miseducation secretary, wanting to deprive people of this and saying, oh, well, classics shouldn't be publicly funded. Well, how terrible to cut people off from their past. We should have a forward-looking memory. If we don't have a past, then we don't have a future. Now, I'm not a sort of Western chauvinist, and there are plenty of ignorant Western people. Look at Bridget Phillipson. Western civilization isn't automatically superior. There are evil Western people as well. We've got a lot to learn from other civilizations, particularly India, China, the Islamic civilization. And I know we can't have a firm separation because there's a melange of civilizations. We can have cultural intercourse, for want of a better word. There can be admixture. They can cross-fertilize the different cultures. But I think that Latin and ancient Greek ought to have a role in state school. By no means be compulsory, but for the very brightest, this is something to really add to and to extend their education, something where they can learn things at a deeper level. And it's an awful pity that they're going to miss out. Well, thank you. There's my penny's worth. Ave atque vale.